Dobbo, how are you doing and how are you managing in lockdown?
Yeah, good. Did well. But they said Stockholm syndrome when you start to like your kidnappers, you know. But it's quite busy. You know, we're working pretty hard with the players. And yeah, it's one thing having 45 or 46 players in a room. It's now having to work with them so remotely is quite busy, which is probably a good thing to be.
Yeah. And Dobbo, I mean, how are you engaging with the players? How are they coping? What are the things that they're being able to do remotely from home? Obviously, some guys are in flats, other guys have the luxury of maybe a bit more space in a farm. How have you tailored the various home workouts and things that they can do?
I think there was a trend, Craig, in rugby before, even before this thing, was more towards individualization. You know, like we always used to say in rugby, the team didn't turn up, or the pack were cut, or that. And I think as we're sort of evolving, you're realizing that the conditioning programs have to be highly individualized. I think there's all the skills deficits. You know, we've got a tight head like Netlin Bashir is brilliant at making those pullback passes, and maybe Walker Lowe is not so good at that. You know, but we would train the tight heads exactly the same way. So this is maybe a forced way of advancing that thinking, you know, that the guys have to be, because Dylan Lade stays in an apartment, Peter Steff and Johanna on a farm with two other brothers. I mean, they could do passing, they could do a move, you know what I mean? They could, yeah. Whereas Dylan's in a flat. So you're right, everything is highly individualized in 4 areas. So the conditioning, we did a great deal with Virgin Active, and they gave us a whole lot of equipment in return for some exposure. That's pretty simple, but it's got to be individualized, as you say, because of the guy's environment and what his positional needs are, what his own personal deficits are. You know, we've got guys, obviously, I can't name them, but guys who need to lose weight. There's a biggest loser competition. There's guys like Little Lates, or who's another one, or BJ Dixon need to put on weight. So that's, and then there's a rugby sort of skills, so they've got deficits. So like, let's say they're taking those shadow balls, those balls that bounce off walls and things, passing to the right or whatever their skills, and they've got to film that, send it back in, and we send them out video drills. Then there's sort of rugby, sort of more tactical, where they're divided into groups, and and we'll send them clips of trends in what England are doing the breakdown, this trend in mall defense, or have a look at how the All Blacks are getting into shape. So that's, they go to weekly projects on that. And the 4th element's more the fun stuff, where we have some fun awards and call it what's the app that they have, the house party or whatever on a Friday afternoon, and try and keep some spirit going and send some funny pics. So it seemed that the engagement's pretty high. You know, I think last week that Cieza thing sort of took us off course a bit, because it stopped their own engagement because they were sort of caught up in that. But now we're back to normal.
Good. And Dom, I mean, obviously we just now had another extension to the lockdown. So we were chatting a little bit before I started recording, just about where we think rugby is going to go and what it's going to look like. You know, in the best case scenario, maybe we start with the news over the weekend that there was talk of a plan for South African rugby to start with the domestic competition in early June. Obviously, there might be a few alterations to that in the weeks to come. But is that the way you think is probably the way it's going to go? Is that a domestic competition of some shape or form with the Super Rugby teams and maybe the Cheetahs and Kings joining? Is that what it looks like is on the horizon at the moment?
Yeah, that's my gut feeling. I suppose the deeper the cry. At first, I thought no, they won't have something with the Cheetahs and the Kings, because you want the sort of commercial imperatives around Super Rugby, like Vodacom Super Rugby. You'd probably want to call it Super Rugby, but you can't if the Cheetahs and Kings have got involved. But then I think as more the crisis has deepened in the rugby, maybe you've got to be more creative and then find a way of including them, because it is obviously much more serious than we first thought. My gut feel, and it's not based on everything, I think that 5th of June may be pretty accurate. I think there's genuine concern from all over and from a national level that these guys aren't conditioned to change direction, take contact. There's nothing we can do about that, So the toys are probably the exception, but there's no way. And I think there's a real worry of injuries. So the talk was 3 to 4 weeks of training to get the guys back up for rugby, which if you think about it, it's almost going to become, having been off for 5-6 weeks, it's going to be almost like a pre-season. Guys normally finish in the old Currie Cup, used to finish in October, mid-November, we started training. So it is a pre-season, and we would never think of playing before Christmas, So I think it's a 4-week window to get our guys ready, 1 week without serious conditioning, without rugby, serious rugby, but just getting them medically and getting them changing direction and then into contact.
Yeah.
So if you work it out, if it does end at the end of April, then probably the first week in June is the realistic one. I agree with you, domestic competition. And then if for some miracle, some borders open up or one country, then you could go and play. Let's say we play for a competition, then the top Super Rugby franchise after that competition could go and play a semi-final with the top Australian, top New Zealand, and maybe give the Jaguars it could be over 2 weekends, semi-final, final, 10 days in Perth or wherever it is, and then you got a Super Rugby champion. I think that'd probably be a nice to have, but I think we'll definitely be playing a domestic competition.
Yeah, which would be at least something for whether it's, I don't know whether it would be played at empty stadiums, but whatever the case may be, at least something for the broadcasters and fans and players. I think we've chatted previously, and we were saying the players, as much as they're trying to keep busy, are also getting, I'm sure, to a phase now where they're just desperate to get back to doing, what they paid to do, which is play and train and actually get into some kind of action. So, I mean, can you imagine if they were playing at stadiums that were either limited to the number of fans or no fans at all? I mean, would the players want to do that, or is that kind of taking away from the whole point of having a huge stadium and supporters all packed in there?
Yeah, I think you're right to allude to the fact that they are quite stressed because, the rumors of pay cuts and potential are getting on. They don't know when they're getting back on the field. They know that they're physically going backwards. But you can say physically going backwards, I mean, they might look great in terms of a Bronco but just from a rugby conditioning point of view, they know they're going backwards. So I think that their stress levels are high. I think they would just be grateful to get on the field because I think it provides an element of job security and the broadcast money is coming in. Like we've had some requests to help our sponsors in various areas, and the guys are really keen because they're not like usual. Do we have to do this appearance? Or obviously not physical appearances anymore, but we have to do this. Now it's, we need to be as bulletproof as we can for the industry. So the guys aren't saying no. So I think it's the one thing we would have to prep for is, I think when I chat to Tom Dawson-Squibber, is our performance coach, is the mental. I think that would be quite disconcerting running out into an empty stadium. I think already in Super Rugby, I think we experienced it a couple of years ago in the Stormers, where I think we played the Bulls. I mean, I'm talking 4 or 5 years ago, Craig. We played the Bulls in a sort of back end of the round competition. We had a full stadium, and then we hiked the ticket prices dramatically. Yeah. And we went out to the Chiefs game in the quarterfinal, and there was nobody there, or not nobody, but there were sort of waves of empty seats. And the players thought, "Jeepers, don't they want us to win, or don't they like us?" Or so we have to get our heads around that. You're right.
Sure. And then another question just along those lines is hopefully we see a domestic competition of some shape or form taking place. But then I see today, obviously, Sanzar CEO Andy Marinos talking about a determination for Super Rugby, also in some guys, to be finished. He spoke of maybe Super Rugby and the Rugby Championship being played concurrently. What is your view on that possibility? Is it something that could happen? I'm just batting to get my head around how that could happen, because then you're losing surely all your international players. To me, it would be a strange way to end Super Rugby.
I missed that story. I saw the story about the condensed rugby championship from the ops guy or the guy from Australian Rugby, but I would agree with you. I mean, I think, that's the big thing against the Currie Cup, where we've gone backwards in the last year or two. The Springboks have played barely nothing. A couple of years ago when they came for the last 3 or 4, after the Rugby Championship, the Springboks played a final. I would say cheapest to play a Super Rugby without those guys. Then, already in Currie Cup, we're playing traditional rivals like the Bulls. It's already a moribund competition. Imagine with playing a Waratahs team or something without a Wallaby. Nah, I think Super Rugby would probably be better off calling it, is my opinion. But
yeah,
or maybe we've got to, like I said, if we could get into one area and play a semi-final. It's not overlapping on the thought.
Yeah, sorry, Dob, I just lost you a little bit there for a couple of seconds. But just maybe a final question. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but a lot of people talking about this period, kind of an enforced break, giving people an opportunity and the decision makers to think about rugby differently and the rugby product differently. And maybe when we get going again, it being a reboot and a restructuring, what are the things in the game that you think need to be changed to kind of get us to a product that maybe works for everyone? And obviously there's factors of money making, but what do you think the players and you as a coach would like to see? Is it, is there change to Super Rugby? Is it more domestic competition? I know you've said before, you've got to have the franchises strong if you want the national team to be strong.
Yeah, I think the opportunity for reboots, right? Whether that's a global season. I've been trying to think of this global season. I don't know how you get it right. The Six Nations is almost unmovable. And once you've got that stuck in, to get them to move Six Nations to summer will be tricky. We moved our soccer to summer here, but we would never be able to move our rugby. We moved to align with the soccer season, 15 years ago. We won't be able to do that in rugby. So I don't know. And I think the impact of those tired end of season tours, when England come here in May or June, as it used to happen, they're more professional now. I mean, England came in, remember 2 years ago, it was a proper test series. So I think, and when we go to the Northern Hemisphere, it's not like we're knackered at the end of the season. Somehow it seems to have that inequality seems to have balanced out. What I think is that the key to me is, Super Rugby has to get even smaller if it's going to survive. It's got to go back, and we all know the Super 12, everybody's talking about. At the end of May, we didn't watch a game. Now, if you can't sleep, you watch Rebels against whoever you want to watch. So that's Super Rugby. But to me, the absolute key is we have to go back to traditional touring. It's not a coincidence that Lions tickets, next season are already going out on tender or whatever the process is called.
Yeah.
We have to have. You can work out a great thing where the Lions in Australia, this All Blacks could be here for a classic tour involving the provincial teams. Not Southern universities, but you know the point. I think if we got back to big tours, which would just do wonders for rugby in the smaller places. If they played the Leopards on a Tuesday afternoon and those Barbarians and that sort of thing. I think a proper touring calendar, Super Rugby over by the end of May, so it doesn't overlap with anything. You could then have a proper tour. The Currie Cup could get some heat. The Springbok could boil a bit while the tour was going on. And then you go into a Currie Cup, sort of the last 3 rounds of Rugby Championship every 2 years, World Cup every 4 years. To me, you get the numbers you'll get from that will be much better viewership and participation-wise than this. I mean, I don't know. You can guess New Zealand, who won the Rugby Championship 4 years ago. Nobody remembers. Boilo. So whenever you play against New Zealand, consider your country at war. But we had war 4 times a year. It's too much. England only play in Scotland every 2 years, and that's where we've completely missed the point in the Southern Hemisphere. Yeah, even the local derbies. I mean, I know Chiefs Pirates play each other 8 times a year or something. We're killing it here as well. So we've got to produce that amount, Super 12, and then a sort of meaningful double round Currie Cup. Cut the numbers of teams in the Currie Cup. Just because 7 teams is half of 14, it passes politically, but maybe we've got to be even braver and cut that down to 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And then double round Currie Cup, Springboks towards the end, and then go on the end of year tour. And the end of year tour, to my mind, shouldn't happen every single year. I mean, I know that numbers, sorry, I'm going on a bit, but you have a meaningful Grand Slam tour, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. That's a hell of an achievement. Goes back to time immemorial, to the 1930s, and then the other team could go and be cheated in France for 2 or 3 tests, the other year. And you could work out a decent touring program. Because now, to me, a tour that goes one off Scotland, one off Wales, one off Italy and Padua, it's not really, that's meaningful. That's my lecture to you.
So maybe less is more.
Definitely. Yeah. That's where we're killing it. Yeah.
All right, Dobson, thanks so much for making time. I've really appreciated chatting to you and getting some insights there.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Thanks for your time.